You're listening to An Amber a Day, the podcast, and I'm Amber Fisher. I am a functional nutritionist in San Antonio, Texas, who specializes in PCOS, infertility, hormone balance. This podcast is all about that and motherhood and the IVF journey. So I'm really excited today because I have Monique from the Infertility and Me Podcast on with me today. So we're going to talk a little bit to her just about her journey and what she does for the IVF community. She's really a bright light in that community. So it's very exciting for me to talk to her and learn a little bit more deeply about what she's gone through and stuff like that. So welcome, Monique. Thanks for being on here.
Oh my gosh. Thank you so much, Amber, for having me on the podcast and so much for your kind words. I'm really not that nice in person. I promise you, I'm a lot more introverted, but
yeah, I am too, actually. So
geez.
doing, I think it's funny because what is it with us introverts, and we always end up making podcasts and putting ourselves out there when I'd rather just be curled up with a book and but no, I love, I think one thing that being an introvert really lends itself to is deep conversations with other people. So I see that a lot with you, I bringing up topics that are typically taboo, but yet you address them in such a real, relatable way and funny too. You always are cracking me up. I mean, I look forward to your posts because I'm I just almost every day you're doing something that's
really
cracking me.
Emotional, or it's going to be really funny. So
yeah,
there's no in between with me. I'm going to give it to you hot or cold.
That's right.
Cracking up.
That's right. So anyway, tell me about you, Monique. How tell me your fertility story, I guess, and just a little bit about you.
So I reside I'm way farther up from Amber. I'm in Maryland. I'm still on the East Coast. So I live right outside of Washington, D.C. And I was actually born in Northern Virginia and pretty much lived here my whole life. We did live in Pennsylvania for about 3 years. We had a couple businesses up there. And then once we were done with that, we moved back home, There's not too many places we would live in the United States based on weather and all that stuff like that. So the East Coast provides a little bit of everything for us here in Maryland, an essential part of the United States. But before I met my husband, was a cosmetologist, and I also, a little fun fact, was a minister, an ordained minister.
Wow!
I was really young when I gave my life over to Christ in the Christian faith. I had grew up in church all my life, and so I never saw myself as a minister, and there weren't any ministers in my immediate family at the time. Never had been really, but I ended up being an ordained minister by the time I was 23, 24-ish.
Wow.
I left the party scene at around 21 and a half, almost 22. And I just felt this calling to spirit and to get closer to the Creator. And the way that in which I knew to do that back then was through the Christian faith. And so when I delved deeply into it and gave it my all, which I do with things that I become passionate about, I did become an ordained minister. And I was a cosmetologist when I met my husband. Before that, I worked in a nursing field. So I've always been kind of on this healing kind of journey, and always delving within the healing spaces. A lot of people don't know cosmetologists often act as coaches and mentors to their clients. There's a lot of talking, girl chat, and just listening. So that's been my life. Now that I look at it, now that I'm older, has always been on the path to being a healer. And so I'm just going to continue on that journey and accept what the Creator and the universe has put before me. And
that really speaks to me a lot, actually, because when I was in my early 20s, I also got into ministry. I was a chaplain at a hospital for a while, and I was this close to going and getting my MDiv to get ordained and everything. And then I just switched tracks because I realized that I didn't quite fit in that world either, my thoughts and things were broader. I don't talk about this a lot on the podcast and stuff because, I get it's very personal to me, my spiritual journey and everything like that. But, that's interesting that both of us kind of were in that world for a while. I think a lot of people who end up getting into healing professions, it's like we're called in these different directions at a
Yeah.
young age. We don't quite know where we're headed yet.
Yeah.
And
It's a
then we have to
journey.
settle. But you're absolutely right. I mean, as a nutritionist, I am not a counselor, but I certainly function as a counselor for a lot of people. And I can imagine that like anything to do with cosmetology, like hair,
Being
any stuff like
intimate with people, because
that.
letting
Yes.
somebody touch your hair is intimate. Letting someone
Yeah.
touch your hands and manicure your hands. And I wasn't a pedicurist or a manicurist. I did that for my mom and select few. I'm just weird about that kind of stuff with strangers, but I definitely was the was the kind of and innately, naturally, I am a listener. I'm a
Yeah.
Libra, so I'm the lady with the balance and scales, and so
Mm-hmm.
I'm always Libras. We're peacemakers.
Mm-hmm.
We always try to find the justice in things. We hate unfairness.
Mm-hmm.
And so everything that's going on with Black Lives Matter movement and anything
Mm-hmm.
that's going on in various continents, with people being suffering and
Yeah.
oppression and all that stuff, it really brings a lot of emotions up for people like myself, being
Yeah.
an empath and then also a Libra. So it's
Yeah.
like why I say, like, my whole life journey has always been about healing and
Yeah.
finding ways to do that. And it wasn't until after I became ordained that I realized that my thought process and my views and my opinions about certain things were much broader than the
Mm-hmm.
Christian faith allowed you to be as a minister. And so I
Mm-hmm.
resigned right before my husband and I got married in 2010. We got
Mm-hmm.
married December 2010, and I resigned that September. The healing has always been there. And
Yeah.
so being in the fertility space, helping people with the podcast, and I've just recently delved into creating free meditations for my listener friends. I don't like to call my
Cool.
listeners audience. I like to call them friends. So my listener friends, fertility friends, I've started doing that, which is like really another way of me putting myself out there vulnerable in a vulnerable way.
Yeah.
And so it's really helped the the podcast and being in this space has really helped me become a better person, and it's helped me become a better healer
Yeah.
too. And I have my fertility journey and the birth of my son to thank for that,
Mm-hmm.
because although I was always very good at it, I wasn't the best at showing my own vulnerabilities.
Mm. Yeah.
I gave space for other people to feel vulnerable with me, but I didn't do it in return,
Mm-hmm.
and I didn't allow them in that way. So now that I
Yeah.
do, it's definitely made me a better person, and has really brought on some empathic abilities that I didn't think I would ever have. So
Yeah.
it's yeah,
Wow.
it's a lot.
Well, hey, no, I resonate with that a lot. That mirrors a lot of what I have gone through. I got married in 2011. That chaplaincy stuff was around that time too. So
Yeah.
like, just really interesting that we have a lot in common. And I'm Scorpio, but I have a lot of
Oh,
Libra. So
yeah. My
yeah, I
niece is
do.
that way.
Mhm. So I find that really, I really resonate with that. But I think it's very difficult when you're going through all this stuff as a person who is a healing type, because we
Yeah.
put so much of ourselves into
What we
everyone
do.
else. But it is, like you said, it's very hard to put yourself out there and be vulnerable. And that's why, my Instagram and everything is so new, because I
Yeah.
just this summer made the commitment that like I'm going to be more real and more honest about what I've been through and put it out there, because I feel like these stories need to be told. But, very hard for me to do that. Like it really took a
Mm-hmm.
lot to kind
Mm-hmm.
of say, all right, I'm going to go ahead and put that out there. And I admire you so much for, all the work that you've been doing, because I really do feel like, you're helping a lot of people with what you're
Yeah.
doing.
I mean,
And
if it's one person, then that's enough for
yeah,
me. That's
where
enough
are
for me.
those meditations? Where can we find those?
The newest one, which is the
Yeah.
first one that I've created, it is on my website. So when you go on
Okay.
the website, it'll be a pop-up that'll direct you to
Cool.
that part of the page, so you don't have to look for it and search for it. And if you
Awesome.
connect with me on Instagram, there's a link in my bio as
Okay.
well. I make everything very easy and accessible because I know everybody's attention spans are really, really short right
Right.
now, and you
Yeah.
don't have to do too much to go through. So
Right.
you'll just be able to go right to it, whether you go on Instagram on my or on my website. I make it very easy. It's a download, an MP3 download, so it can go directly onto whatever device you prefer, whether it's your phone or your laptop. because you can, if you do a meditation quickly in your office, you just got off a bad call with somebody and you need a minute. And
Yeah.
it does have music behind it. It's not silent. It's not like an affirmation
Right.
meditation. So it does have music behind it, to just help you get into that vibe and everything. And I'm hoping to do some really creative things with the free meditations for my listener friends and for the fertility friends on Instagram, because a
That's
lot of
super
them
cool.
do use meditation. And
Yeah.
I kind of want to break the stigma that you can be Christian, you can be Muslim, and you can be Catholic and practice Catholicism and still meditate. They're
Yeah.
two very different things. And that was one thing I didn't know
Mhm.
before, learning about it more after I left the Christian faith, um, and resigned as a minister. They're two very different things, but I do my best to present it in a way that anybody can use. It's just so funny how life works.
Yeah.
And
Tell me a little bit about
yeah,
your fertility story. So, when
yeah,
did you and your
wow.
husband kind of start trying for kids and all that?
If I cry, I'm just letting you know, guys know I'm a
Hey,
big
that's
crybaby
okay.
now. Fertility has made me like the biggest crybaby. It's so funny. But yeah, so it was 2012. We had been married for 2 years. I was 29 and I hadn't been pregnant. And I had been off of birth control since about 2008. So it'd been some time, but I was practicing before I met my husband. I was practicing celibacy. And so, of course, I wasn't going to get pregnant during that time. But I never got pregnant while we dated. I never got pregnant after we got married, the 2 years. And so I was like, something's got to be off. Something's wrong. And so I went to the fertility specialist and had my HSG, which is the water dye test, to see if your tubes are open and if your fallopian tubes have any blockage, if your uterus has any cysts, fibroids, anything like that going on. Everything was fine except for I had a right tubal blockage. And we moved forward with the IUI, and it was unsuccessful. There was nothing wrong with my husband. They had it so easy. I feel like all they gotta do is get their sperm checked and everything, right? So,
Mhm.
but there are men who have some really difficult
Right.
cases, but it wasn't the case for us. It was female factor, always has been. And so we had the unsuccessful IUI, and then we didn't do anything else for 4 years. We went on this hiatus to, I guess, mentally even deal with it,
Mhm.
and it was scary. I didn't think I would ever have a baby after getting that diagnosis. And I did all the things. I did the Rakai specialist, which is great. If you've been considering doing it just because, do it. I did that. I've done hypnotherapy. I've done past regressive life therapy, to deal with some deep rooted issues and find out where they came from. So that's really interesting and very enlightening. So if you've been thinking about it, you can do that too. Um, and then 4 years later, with lots of meditation, prayer, getting my body prepared for motherhood, we went back and I didn't have right tubal blockage anymore, but I did have uterine polyps, which are like
Mhm.
small little skin tags in the uterus. And I have them on my cervix, but it doesn't cause any pain or bleeding like they sometimes can. So they removed the polyps in my uterus, cleaned that up, and then I had to be treated for hypothyroidism. I think
Mhm.
a lot of the working out and weightlifting that I was doing was contributing to the hormonal imbalance
Mhm.
and caused the hypothyroidism.
Yeah.
I don't have it anymore. I just got checked a month ago and trying to conceive baby number two. So right now I'm like kind of in this unexplained phase.
Yeah.
But summer of 2016, we got our big fat positive after our second egg retrieval. We never had the first egg embryo transfer because the egg didn't fertilize. It just
Mhm.
wasn't a good match. Either the egg quality or the sperm wasn't right or something. And so the second egg retrieval resulted in the positive embryo. And we did a 3-day fresh transfer because we opted for natural cycle IVF, which is
Mhm.
a less invasive form of IVF, less
Mhm.
medication, and it works naturally with your cycle if you get your cycle regular every month.
Yeah.
And which has never been an issue for me, but I do have like low progesterone. I'm known for having that because I spot like 2 to 3 days before my period starts, and that's an indication of low progesterone,
Mhm.
and or low estrogen too. So,
Right.
which still happens with me now and everything. I've gotten it shorter down to like a day before, but it's still still not right, you know.
Yeah.
And so we got our big fat positive. My first beta test was 786. It was high, and
Wow.
it was viable, but he came early. I had him at 24 weeks, 4 days. So
Wow.
yeah,
I
it was
didn't
so
know
much
you had a
devastation.
yeah.
Yeah, so much devastation between infertility and then being a NICU mom and not knowing what's going
Yeah.
to happen. Statistically, baby micro preemie boys do not survive uh, being born so early, and so and he had like maybe 35-40% chance of survival and not
Yeah.
having any mental or physical delays. But let me tell you guys, you wouldn't know it if you saw him today.
Yeah.
Um, he has surpassed all of his milestones. He's done so very early. He's
How
three
old
and a
is he
half.
now? He's
He's
three and a
three and
half.
a half. Yep, he'll be 4 January 20th. But he's so intelligent. He's just so blessed that everything that we've been through. He's here, and he's my signs and wonders every day.
Yeah.
So yeah.
I don't know if you know this, but my son was also preemie. I had
I
him at
did
30
see
weeks.
that. Yeah, I did see that
So
on your
not
website.
anything like
Yeah,
what you went through, but I had a fairly long NICU stay, and
yeah, that's still long.
that it's like after you go through all this stuff to get pregnant and everything. And I don't think a lot of women realize who are going through IVF that IVF moms have a higher rate of having preemies,
Yeah.
and then it's
I was
male
high risk.
children,
Yeah, I
they
was
always
high
told
risk
me,
the whole
well,
time. Yeah.
he's wimpy or whatever they said,
Yeah.
they called him a wimpy white boy because I
Yes,
guess
that's the
that's what they
term.
say.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
So, it was, and he did great. I was very proud of him, but gosh, was that an experience. I was on so much adrenaline during that whole process that I didn't even start processing that NICU stay until like recently. And he's almost a year old,
Yeah, I kind of had the same
because,
experience. Yeah.
you're
Yeah.
just kind of focused on them and getting them out of there like as quick as you possibly can. So how long was he in the NICU for?
The entire 4 months,
Wow.
because he was 15 weeks early,
Yeah.
and his graduation date is May 29th. And his original due date was between the 8th and the 14th of May. So he would
Wow.
have been a Taurus. But yeah, we stayed the entire stay, and God bless our doctors and nurses there at Washington Hospital Center in DC. Shout out to them, because they wanted him to stay longer, even though he wasn't on any oxygen and he hadn't been probably close to a month when he left. But
Hmm.
they were so hell bent on making sure that um, that he wouldn't have any bradycardias. You remember that
Yeah.
term? Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah.
Bradycardia is when the baby,
Brady's and apneas.
yeah,
Yeah.
oh my gosh, the baby
Yeah.
just forgets for a
Mhm.
second to breathe, and it's really common with preemies, and they just have to grow out of it.
Yeah.
It's so freaking scary. The first time it
It's
happened, I
so
was like, oh
scary.
my God, freaking
So
alarms are going
scary.
off. I can still hear those alarms.
Yeah, I
I'll
know.
never forget the alarms. Never forget the
Yeah.
alarms. And I
Sometimes
don't
I
care.
dream those.
Let me tell
Sometimes I
you,
dream that sound and it wakes me up. Yeah.
just oh my gosh, I had video. Like, I watch old videos. You watch old videos from when
Hmm.
I don't. I'm sure you and your husband took so many pictures,
Oh,
made
yeah.
so many freaking videos. You
Oh,
could make a
yeah.
movie, right?
Yeah.
And I listen back, and I'm listening to like all the beep beep beeps and the sounds, and it's like nostalgia, because you go right back to that time, and
Yes.
it's like, oh my gosh,
Hmm.
I can't believe we endured that. Like, I
I
don't
know.
care if your baby was born 5 days early, 4 days early, a month
Mhm.
early. NICU is very scary, because
Yeah.
it's much like infertility, because you do not know what is going to
What's the
happen.
outcome? Yeah.
You don't know.
Yeah. And especially when your child is born, significantly early and it's sudden and everything. Did you have warning that he was coming? Were you able to get steroid shots and stuff, or
Yeah,
was
I
it
had the
like
magnesium, burns like
good? Yeah.
hell,
Yeah, I know.
to
I
stop
did that
premature
too.
labor.
Yeah.
I was on bed rest for a week at the hospital before he actually came. So
Me
he was
too.
born I went into premature labor at 23 weeks, 5 days, had
God.
him exactly a week later at 24 weeks, 4 days, the next Friday.
Wow.
So I had been in the hospital all freaking week, couldn't brush my teeth for like the first 4
Yes.
freaking days. So I'm like having dragon breath and stuff. And I know the freaking nurses were talking about me, okay? But it was just so freaking wild. Because
Yeah,
you
they
know what
kept
happens?
yes.
It's ah, it's
They
like,
kept me in that labor and delivery room for days because
yes,
they had me on the magnesium, And they didn't want to they were talking, like I had different doctors say, okay, we might stop labor and you might get to go home. And then I had other doctors be like, no, you're going to be here till you deliver. And I just didn't know what was going on. They had the NICU doctor come in. I don't know if this happened to you. The NICU
Yeah,
doctor
she
comes in
was
and
the one
talks
who
to
told
you.
me. She was the one who told me 40% because he was a boy.
Yes. And you're just like,
So mad.
what? Because after everything that you go through, and I don't know how your pregnancy was, but I had a really difficult,
Did you?
hard pregnancy. I was on bed rest for most of it. And so it was just like, it just felt like this constant everything fertility related for me has always just felt like fighting nature, just like this constant battle, just trying to just grab whatever pieces I can,
Yep.
and all I ever prayed for was just one. I just wanted to have one,
Yeah.
and I got my wish. So like, I'm grateful for it and everything, but it's like there's a lot of grief and trauma associated with that. And the fact that
It is still quite lonely sometimes. And referring back to your previous statement about pregnancy and then still being a support to those who haven't conceived yet. My pregnancy, I still grieve my pregnancy. And it is one of the reasons why I want to have a second one because I want to have a second chance of experience the full
yeah,
pregnancy.
yeah.
And it took me a long time to admit that. And it's only been recently that I have been able to talk about it without crying.
Mm-hmm.
I felt cheated. I didn't have a
Yeah.
baby shower. I didn't get to do the beautiful pregnancy photos with my naked belly and my half naked self. Like I was going to do it all. You hear me?
Mm-hmm.
Do it all. I never got the chance to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think a lot of times we forget that we desire for this baby during infertility, but we don't prepare our minds for after the baby's born. We're just so hell bent on focusing on getting pregnant.
Mm-hmm.
And so when he was born, I just going into the mother's and the father's bathroom outside of the NICU because we weren't allowed to use the bathroom in the NICU. We had to go
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
outside of it and use the
us too.
bathroom. And which is great because it did keep,
Yeah, it keeps it
RSV
safe.
down and all that stuff. And I would just cry all the time.
Mm-hmm.
I would just cry all the time. And then seeing him for the first time, he looked really good for being
Mm-hmm.
so early, but it was just still so freaking scary. And then my husband was grieving and stuff. And I think men go through that thing where they try to detach themselves in the beginning because they don't know what's going to happen and they don't want to get too more attached than what they already are. And then, but I had a really good pregnancy. I had one little scare. And that was it up until the time I gave birth and had him at 23 and went into premature labor at 23 weeks. I was really pretty when I was pregnant. He made me beautiful. I mean, let me tell you, my hair was thick and my nails weren't growing. I usually have really long nails, but that's the only thing. My nails didn't grow. It was the opposite of the way that it normally would have been. So my nails are breaking a lot, but my hair was beautiful, girl. It was just, oh my gosh, it had gotten so thick. But it's I went through all of it. I just kept saying to myself when I went through premature labor and when they rushed me to get my C-section, I was just like, oh my gosh. I was like, Lord Christ, Holy Spirit, universe. I was calling on all the angels, all one thing I say when I pray and meditate is all that is pure and of good light in this universe and the next, whatever. I know we didn't come this far, through infertility for 4 years,
Yeah.
through the disagreements, the arguments, the bitterness, the resentment, all the freaking supplements I took, all the money I spent, you know what I
Right.
mean? I didn't do all of this to lose my freaking baby. Like, come on.
Yeah.
I think that if I had lost him due to premature birth, I don't know where I would be right now.
Mhm.
I don't. There's
Yeah.
no way.
I think about that a lot too. I'm like, and I see that happening sometimes to other women. I've seen
Yeah.
recently, I saw a couple women that happened to. And I can't, like, my heart breaks for that. And no words could ever, like,
Describe it.
even
No. Come
validate it. Like,
remotely.
it's,
No.
yeah, no, but I mean, having been through the NICU experience, like, and knowing just how deeply attached and bonded you are to that baby from like the moment he's born, like, I can't even imagine it going through. And sometimes these babies go they're alive for months and then they die, and you just think,
That's what
why?
I'm
You know
saying. Like,
why?
I've
I
seen
just
it.
I,
But
I
they get off the oxygen, and then something else happens with with an internal organ. It
or
gives
they get
out on
neck or something. Yeah,
or they
they
get
get that
RSV,
right,
and oh
and
my gosh.
you wonder why. I mean, I've been kind of in maybe a slightly darker place lately than I have been before, because with my cancer coming back and having to
Oh
have everything
wow.
removed and all that over the summer, it's been a hard year. I think a lot of people have been through a really hard year this year. But
Yeah.
for me, I feel like, this has been a particularly hard year for me. And I often find myself wondering things like that, why do these things happen? I don't know. And I don't think there's really good answers for that.
Mm-mm.
But I do know that women who go through these things are some of the strongest people I've ever met. Like,
Mhm.
I'm
Mhm.
amazed by them. Like, what you
Mhm.
went through after everything that you had already been through, to have to go through that and worry all that time about your son. Wow. Yeah.
Yeah. And I in Amber using the word, are some of the strongest people that we know, women we know, and whatever your gender identity is. That does not mean that you cannot cry,
Right.
and I
Yeah.
like to reiterate that a lot because being strong, um, it's a blessing and a curse.
Yes.
It's a blessing
Yeah.
and a curse,
I can
but it
relate to
doesn't,
that.
I am not a toxic positivity person. I'm not going to tell you not to feel bad about something. I'm going to tell you, okay, well, let's talk about it. You know what I mean? Let's figure out why. What's the root cause of that, and go below the surface level, because being strong does not mean you cannot cry. Being strong does not mean you don't get to be vulnerable, and you don't, and you're not courageous, and you're not brave. That's why I like Brene Brown and her teachings and her work that
Yes.
she does.
Mhm.
And her podcast is great if you've never listened to it. It's called Unlocking Us. And bravery and strength are the same thing. And I think that especially in the fertility space, because we deal with so much uncertainty, you just constantly feel like you can't get out of the slump
Yeah.
of the negativity, and it's very difficult to 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 discipline your mind to say, okay, this is what it is. I'm going to acknowledge it right here in this moment, and I'm not going to overreact about it. But I am going to deal with it.
Yeah.
It's very hard to do.
It's hard to find that balance between, like,
Hmm.
because on the one hand, you want to have a certain sense of like hopefulness or
Yes.
positivity about the treatments that you're going through. On the other hand, I'm a huge realist, right? Some people might say
Hmm.
I'm a pessimist, but I say I'm a realist. But,
Hmm.
I look at statistics and facts, and I like to be, and I know a lot of women are like this, I like to know the risks and know
Yeah.
what to potentially prepare myself for. I found that helps me through the IVF process more than like this, like you said, toxic positivity of like, it's going to work out. Everything's going to be great. That's just not me. I don't
Hmm.
feel like that's authentic,
Hmm.
because that's
Hmm.
not really how I felt inside. I didn't really know that it was going to work. And
Yeah.
saying it and affirming it in a way that I felt like was fake wasn't useful for me. Um,
Yeah.
and that's a big soapbox of mine, because I see some of that sometimes, and I'm like,
Hmm.
I worry about when we do that, when we try to be positive at all costs and we don't really give space for the real emotions that we're feeling, because that always catches up with you. I mean, I've experienced
Hmm.
that in my life, like with everything that I've been going through this summer. I've been trying to be, I mean, it's hard when you have a baby now, because it's like
You
everything's
don't
about
get to focus.
pride. I don't
Yeah.
have time to grieve and all that. So when
Yeah.
it does hits me because of something else that happened. Like, a bee
A
stung me
trigger.
the other day, and I'm
Yeah.
like, whoa, crying about, and it
Hmm.
wasn't about the
Hmm.
bee, it was about everything else.
What you're
But
going through.
but it's important to really take space for the real emotions that you're feeling, whether they be positive
Yeah.
and,
Hmm. Hmm.
hopeful, which is the case too. I mean, I think you can have both at the same time. You can
Yeah.
be
I don't.
hopeful, but also,
You can have emotions that have a negative sense behind them, and you have your positive emotions, but none of it is bad. And I think a
yeah,
lot of times we feel like negative emotions that
right.
worry, stress, anxiety, depression.
Anger.
those are not bad things. They just are what they are. You
Mm-hmm.
know, just like with life, I find a lot of comfort in the idea that shit just happens.
Yeah,
You know, I find a lot of comfort in that because it takes a
I do too.
lot of pressure off of me, and
Mm-hmm.
that I didn't do anything for
Mm-hmm.
this to happen. It wasn't karma, you know.
Mm-hmm.
And so, because for a while I felt like it was karma, like I had did something to someone a long time ago, and so this is my punishment. I'm being stuck with infertility and having a baby at 24 weeks and not knowing if he's going to live or not. You know what I mean? So
Yeah.
it's shit just happens, you guys.
Yeah.
That's it.
I take comfort in, there's a Christian idea that I'm sure you're familiar with, that God takes things that are negative in our life and uses them for our benefit. So it's not that he causes the bad things to
Hmm.
happen,
Yeah.
but when bad things do happen, because shit happens,
Hmm.
we can turn that around and turn it into something beautiful.
Yeah.
Um, and I see that a lot
I
with people
believe
who've
that.
been through awful, horrible things. They
Hmm.
take that and they turn that into a light for other people. And gosh, if we can't do anything but that, like that's enough, because
Yeah.
life is so hard. I think everybody goes through very difficult things in their life. Some things are more public than others, but I
Hmm.
think we all
Hmm.
go through stuff, and sometimes it seems like some people have it harder than others.
It does. Yeah.
And those people end up oftentimes being great healers who do really important work. So,
You
they turn it
know.
into
Yeah.
something positive, but yeah.
And it's all about accepting the calling
Mhm.
to your life's work too,
Yeah.
because there's many people who go through things like this and much worse, and they choose to live their life in a different route, or maybe they didn't accept the calling of being of service.
Right.
I think it is a calling because um, in a lot of ways it goes um, without being noticed.
Mhm.
And you don't all becoming a healer doesn't mean you're going to be that influencer on Instagram who has the 20,000 followers plus,
Mhm.
and has that level of influence. You could have 200 people following you, but then you may have a podcast that gets 1,000, 2,000 plus listens a week. So a lot of the healing space goes unnoticed
Mhm.
when you're what I call a micro influencer.
Mhm.
And you feel like it's being unnoticed, but it's not.
Mhm.
And the healers, being a healer and having the healing capability, um, there's no way you can be a healer and not have suffered.
Mhm. Yeah,
And I
I
think
agree
that's
with
what the life of Christ was about.
that. Mhm.
Sometimes when we go through things like this, you can either accept the purpose behind it or you don't. And not everybody finds purpose that for them going
Mhm.
through infertility.
Mm. Yeah.
I just knew for myself that I didn't go through all of this for nothing, to
Mhm.
keep it to myself and to
Mhm.
keep the things that I've learned to myself.
Yeah.
And it doesn't matter what I do in life, what kind of business I open. There's always people that find me that need healing.
Mhm. Yeah.
Those kind of people just draw to me,
Yeah. I'm the same
and
way.
they get what they need and then they move on.
Yeah.
And you know, it's a
And I
lot.
think, like, we're having a good talk right now. I really
It's a
like
lot.
I'm like,
Yeah.
I love this woman. But yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, like you were talking about influencers and stuff and
Hmm.
being a micro influencer. And there's temptation sometimes with me to kind of want a bigger audience because I feel
Hmm.
like I have something to say, right?
Right.
But in my work that I do, I'm never without somebody that I'm helping. And they find me, like the ones who really need me
Yeah.
find me. And
Yeah.
so, there's a lot of noise out there. Like there's a lot of noise on Instagram. That's one of the
Oh,
reasons
honey,
why I like held
I
off like
dreaded
getting
it.
on
Trust
there.
me.
Yes, I was like, I don't know if I want to deal with this, and like I don't take
Yeah.
good enough pictures and all this stuff. But somebody told me one time, they were like, you know what? Really what Instagram is best for is it's a storytelling platform. So if you have a
Hmm.
story to tell, you tell what you tell, and the people who are meant to find it will find it. And, if that means
I
that you
believe
end up
that.
one day with like 100,000 followers, well, then you
So
do.
be
But
it.
if it's 200 people, but you really impacted their life, then
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
great too. So, um,
Exactly.
I think you're totally right that suffering breeds healing. Like there's no, healers are always the wounded healer. Everybody who has been wounded, I think, does have that capability. Whether they want to use it or not, I mean, is up to them. And I,
It's up
like
to
you said,
you.
not everybody finds purpose in their infertility journey. For me, I have to make purpose out of stuff because if I don't,
Yeah.
I'm
Yeah.
like, that takes me to
Yeah.
a really dark place if I don't try to find some purpose for
I
it.
am the same way.
So,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
maybe it's just human nature, but I don't think so. But
No, I don't either. I don't either. And you know, I told myself going into this because um, as a podcaster, it takes time
yeah,
to monetize, and that's whether you sell a product or whether you get advertisement deals and stuff.
hmm
And I told myself, if it never happens, it never happens,
yeah,
but as long as somebody's listening, I'll continue to do it.
yeah,
And there's been some things that happened over this last year since I've been doing it. It'll be a year in November. There's
okay,
been some things in my life where I just could have easily put the mic down.
yeah,
Easily put the mic down. You know what
yeah,
I mean? Home life. And but then somebody will message me and be like, "Oh my God,"
yeah,
and so, or another fertility friend in a space like yourself or myself, who's an influencer, will hit me up and be like, "Can we collab and do something?" So it's like just when I feel like I don't have anything left to give,
hmm
universe sends me somebody,
yeah,
sends me an angel to remind me that what you have to offer is still needed. And
yeah,
so, let me tell you, I never thought I would have 3,000 people following my podcast page.
hmm
It's like incredible to me. That's like amazing to me because even though I know I had wisdom to share and I have the capability to help people heal, I just never thought I would have that kind of impact on people at all.
hmm
And it brings me to tears every time somebody sends me a message or leaves a nice review for the podcast. I literally get teary eyed and I cry because I just never thought um, that my voice would be that powerful,
yeah,
And um, so I say it all the time, like they keep me going. They keep me going because mom life and wife life and just life in general, like I
hmm
tell you, it's a lot to keep up with, but
yeah.
it's
It is. I I've been doing
yeah,
my podcast since I started it in November 2018,
gotcha.
and I'm still like not even to 20 episodes yet because like you said, stuff
Life.
gets in the way.
Hmm.
I put the mic down for months at a time.
Yeah.
And then, like you said, somebody always comes back and they're like, "Hey, I really miss your podcast. Why don't you still do them?"
Mm.
Or,
Hmm.
they want to know like if they can come on there or what. And so it's just like it keeps you going. I often have thought, am I really just talking to myself here?
Yeah.
Like, is this
Hmm.
reaching anyone? Every time I start thinking that, then somebody is like says that they'll message me, "Hey, I'm listening to you right now." And I'm like, okay, so there's somebody out there that needs to hear what they need to hear. I think you're proof positive of that because, like, with those 3,000 followers, I mean, I see that like people love you. Like, you are just such a light. I mean, you really are. Like, I scroll through. So, I have the two pages, right? I've got my nutrition page, which is, kind of like I talk about nutrition stuff. It's like a funnel
Hmm.
for my private practice.
Yeah.
And then I started my kind of pet project, which is like the after IVF, so motherhood after IVF stuff. And I don't really talk about nutrition on there at all because that's just fun for me. But I follow people
Yeah.
who are all like IVF related, and it's like I don't know, it's just noise, noise, noise. And then I see something
Yeah.
from you, and I'm like, oh, there's Monique, and I know your name, and I like, you know, there's just something about you that's special.
Hmm.
So, if anything comes out of today's podcast for you, I want to remind you that you are so special and so like you're awesome and you really bring a lot to the community and I think people really, really value you. I know I do. So,
It's I don't talk about it a lot. I have talked about it in recent months on like fertility rally. They had me on there with another young woman who was who's a Black American, and that was one of the things that I doubted in the beginning was because I am Black and it's a very Caucasian space, and
Yeah.
so that's why I said that the followers and the listeners, who are the people who are that are like really finding me now, it's that's why it brings me to tears because I'm like, is anybody going to listen? Because I'm a brown girl, and
Mhm.
statistically, it takes a lot more time and work for brown skin
Yeah.
creatives to become noticed
Yeah.
and to be valued.
Yeah.
And so that was another thing too, that I often always doubted, especially like the first 6 months. And let me tell you, some of the messages I get, it's like, and it doesn't happen all the time, but when it happens, it's like really impactful for
Mm.
me as a
Yeah.
creative and as someone putting myself out there like that, and doing my comedy stuff. Like people who know me in real life outside of and social media know that side of me.
Hmm.
So me putting it out there for everybody else is like it's new. It's really
Hmm.
new.
I mean, with everything that you're talking about too, like I admire you so much because you're right. I mean, it is a very Caucasian space. And there need to be more influencers of color. There need to be more
Yeah.
influencers in the IVF community because they're out, I mean, those people are out there, but the fact that like we
Hmm.
have a community where it doesn't feel like safe for people to
Yeah.
like share their story, maybe we need to look, I mean, obviously we need to look at a lot of things in this country a little bit deeper, but
Yeah.
yeah.
Um, I think we all have some prejudices about different races,
Yeah.
and what the impact that they have and what they go through in the fertility space.
Yeah.
It's still, it's so taboo in general. So
Yeah.
when you think about it, it's like it has to be taboo in individual cultural communities. It has to be
Yeah.
really. I mean, I've watched documentaries in the last 2 years of women in South Asia that have to buy their menstrual pads and tampons in secret still. So it's like
That's crazy.
we can't even normalize the conversation about the menses and
I know.
give men the proper education on what is really a beautiful thing,
Yeah.
a really beautiful process. And
Yeah.
that's one thing I'm going to do as a boy mom is make sure that my son understands and has a positive view on what it really is and not
Yeah.
shaming women and say, oh, you on this time of the month.
Yeah.
See,
I know.
let's not go there.
Hey,
Let's not
as
do
the
that.
nutritionist, I talk, I mean, I specialize in fertility. So all over my Instagram page are references to menstrual cycles and, you know, bowel movements and stuff. Like that stuff
Yeah,
is, that's the human body. It's how it functions, where we're all part of our human bodies for these lifetimes that we're living. And we have to understand them, how they work, and not be afraid of the
yeah,
words that describe them, And so I'm big on that too. Yeah. And I
yeah.
think like as a feminist, also teaching my son about what women go through
Mm-hmm.
and, you know, the kind of extra thing. 'Cause, my son's he's a white boy, and I know
Yeah.
what that means, as far as the opportunities that he will
Mm-hmm.
probably have
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
all that. And I don't want him to grow up um, not being conscious of the things that
The
are
oppressions of
given to
others.
him in
Yeah,
life.
yeah, yeah,
So as best as I can do, and I'm not perfect, but as best as I can do to help him understand not just women, but um, people of other races and all of
yeah,
that. That's what I plan to try to do. So
yeah.
this is going to be a good one. I'm gonna have trouble. I'm gonna have a lot of trouble editing this one down to like 45 minutes. I might just let it go long, or I might do it in two parts. I don't know. Uh,
Yeah, oh my gosh, it's so hard sometimes because um but like you said, you can do it in two parts too. That's the beauty of the podcast world
yeah,
too,
right.
is that you get to choose. You make the content and you get to choose how the story is written. But it's very freeing to tell your story in the way that you want it to be told and
Hmm.
giving space to other people to do something. Like I'm an air sign, and so most of the time air signs are very free spirit people. At the same time, ambiverted or introverted, but I just feel like going into my 40s, I feel like I'm 25 again, even though I'm older, and it's very liberating.
Yeah.
And I don't want anyone to look at my page or look at my podcast artwork and don't think that they're not welcome. That's
Yeah.
always been my goal.
Well, this has been an amazing conversation. I've enjoyed it so much. I really feel like I got to know you really well, and I think my listeners will be really interested in like continuing to follow you and watch what you do and gain strength and balance and all those things from you. So, can you tell everyone where they can follow you?
Yeah, so Instagram is pretty long. Infertility and Me Podcast. That's my main page. That's where I'm the most active. And then my website is the same, infertilityandmepodcast.com. And I do have a Facebook page. I do post on there if you prefer Facebook. So anything that's usually on Instagram is on Facebook too as well. So it's up to you really where you are the most comfortable.
And you said you have a website too? Is that
Mhm.
right?
Yeah. Infertilityandmepodcast.com.
Okay.
Yeah.
Awesome. So I'll link to all that stuff in the show notes and everything. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast. And thank you everybody for listening, and have a great day. Talk to you soon. All right. Bye.